Right, now, what I need to do is open this up.
I think it's David.
Good evening.
Evening, David.
Oh, it's Howard and Iris.
Not going to miss it. Howard, come say hello to David.
Sorry, doll.
Right, you got a lot to do. You busy?
Just a bit.
All right, we'll ignore you.
One of these days, no, not now. I mean, one of these days I'm going to have to have a quiet word with you about my mum.
Is it serious?
Well, she went to the shops today, despite me telling her not to.
Oh, and I keep telling her she mustn't.
I can't describe it in public.
Sitting.
Blazing around with that bad.
Oh dear.
Anyway.
I can't let on, David, that I've spoken to you because she'll lose trust in me. So I can't say that I know about it.
Yeah.
I'm going to turn off the television. Here's Howard. Come on, swing around.
Hello, Howard.
Turn off the television, Howard.
Shh, Michael.
We are turning off the telly.
I've got to remember to record. How do I do that?
From the garage. Anything needed from the garage.
Apparently it is recording.
I can stream that call.
Yes, it's recording. Hey, Judy Simon, when you're on. And Nicola, whoever you are, hello. Possibly one of Geraldine's daughters.
There's something in the garage you want for supper. Leave the bag there and bring the things on.
All right, how are you doing, Howard and Iris? All right?
Yes, we're fine, thank you. I had a bad reaction to the jab last week and knocked me out for 4 or 5 days.
Oh dear.
But it's fine. It's fine.
Yeah,
Repaired,
just for a
sorted.
few days and then it stops.
Yeah, they don't
I've
advertise it.
About 10% of people have that problem.
Yes, so I believe. Howard, come on
I know
back.
that because I told you the other day. Dear, oh dear, oh dear. Kids okay?
Oh, yes, I'm just going to get Howard. You don't need to.
No, that is not what I meant to do. No.
Yes.
You could straight switch my phone off.
Geraldine, how are you?
Take that away, Michael. Fine, thanks. I've had a good gin.
Right. You're just at the right height now.
Am I? Am I too tall?
No, you're a perfect height.
You sure? Is it not?
Yeah.
Am I not being missed?
Sorry?
No. Am I not being missed? No.
No, it's a perfect height. Your hair looks fantastic.
My hair, very funny. I'm always playing with it. Oh, you've gone off.
Hello, Geraldine.
Is that Iris?
Yes.
Hi, Iris. How are you?
Good, my love. How are you? Howard's with me. I don't know if we're on camera or not.
No, you're not, Iris.
Oh, we're not. So what do we do to get the camera going?
At the bottom, there's a picture of a camera with a
Share,
line.
share
with a line.
screen?
Listen to, no, Iris, listen. There's a picture of a camera at the bottom with a line across it.
There we go.
Oh, I see you now, Iris.
Yeah, there we go. There's
You
Howard's.
haven't changed. I haven't seen you for a long time. You haven't changed.
We don't come up to Glasgow very much anymore.
I know. And Howard lost his lovely sister. I lost mine and you lost yours, Howard.
Yes,
Am I
yes,
right?
I'm sorry. I wish you a long life too.
visited by people from all over the world who come to pray here. There are prayer goers here, local and from far away, on a daily basis.
Somebody's got a TV on in the background or something.
Noise. What's the noise?
Somebody's got the TV or radio on in the background.
No, we've turned ours off.
Don't worry, I can mute you all eventually.
Norman, Lenny Wilson, oh God, are you being serious?
So you make sure your face is.
Well, there's my map.
Already there.
Oh.
Doing anything yet, no?
Oh, okay.
See, I want to see all the people. See who we know and who we don't know.
Trying to move right up so we haven't got the donkeys next to us.
Who's that?
We might know some of these people. There's Geraldine.
So are you at home at the moment, Geraldine? Are you in your house?
Yes, I'm sitting in my kit. I'm at home sitting at home.
Right. No, I speak to Shannon, obviously.
Yes.
So we hear how you're getting on.
I know.
No.
Details.
And I think you had a mazel tov recently.
Oh, last weekend was my
Bat
sister.
mitzvah?
No, her bar mitzvah. My sister's Susan's grandson's bar mitzvah.
Ah, right. Well, that was nice. We've just had a new baby.
Oh, mazel
A
tov.
couple of days ago, Anthony Firestone, Linda's youngest.
Oh, that's nice. I know. Yeah. That's nice. I know. I gave Linda a lift a couple of, but it must be about three years ago, maybe from the airport. Michael and I.
Yes.
Because I think Richard shoot Katie out, one of my girls, out for a while.
Oh, right. No. But Richard still lives in Glasgow, of course.
I know, she told me. She'd come to visit and that's how she was on the flight.
Well, just have happy memories of Susan and Linda. We try to have of Linda too.
Hi, Geraldine.
Hi, Gary.
How are you? Hi, Hayley.
Hi, Gary. How are you?
Yeah, all good, thank you. Bit cold down here.
Oh, come up to Scotland. It's cold.
You don't know about cold like it is.
That's my Nakhaton name from London.
Oh, hi there. Hi.
Hello, Howard and Iris. Lovely to see you.
Yes, and to you. We're in sunny Bournemouth, freezing cold.
Oh, I tell you what, I wish I was in. It's lovely, Bournemouth. I love it.
Oh, we love it. We came down from London. We're down here 20 years from London now.
Is it really 20 years?
Yes, 2000, year 2000. So
I know. Remember you when you lived in the flat when you came to your mum for that time across from me.
Yes, yeah.
When we were first married. That's
right, before Sylvie and Herbert bought the flat.
43 years ago.
Oh my goodness.
43 and a half years ago.
Well, we've celebrated our golden wedding.
Did you? Wow,
yes, So, I mean, where do the years go?
I don't know. They go. Well, we'll be 44 this summer.
Goodness.
Terrible, isn't it?
Well, it is in one way.
How are you, Hayley? Everybody well?
Oh, we're surviving, Gary.
Fantastic day.
Bored. Gary.
It's Groundhog Day, isn't it? Every day is Groundhog Day.
I've never felt so bored.
There's Angela. It's nice to see you, Gary and Angela.
Hello. Hi, Hayley. Hi, Geraldine.
Hello.
There's a dog.
Out somewhere. He's out. I don't know, he's outside.
I've never done anything like this before, let me tell you, like on a Zoom like this.
You'll be fine, Geraldine. You'll be fine.
Be me. Anyway, it's lovely that you've joined in, Gary and Angela.
Oh, no. Keep moving to the left.
I think Geraldine.
Yes.
Kelly's going to come on in a minute. Kelly's also going to watch in a minute.
Oh, that's nice.
Haley,
Gary Grant. Oh,
Haley.
Gary.
How's your dog? How's the
He's
dog?
doing well. He's doing quite well. Well,
How's with your dog?
Myra.
he's doing okay. Well, kind of.
That isn't Myra. Oh
Hi,
my
Eva.
God.
Eva, I can see you.
I can see
Iris. Friend Myra.
Myra.
Grew up with her mum.
How are you?
Lost her mother.
Myra.
Everybody, if I could ask you all to be quiet for a minute.
Yeah.
Shh. We're going to be starting in about 7 minutes.
Not possible, is it? For Jewish people to be quiet.
Geraldine, I know. When I quiet in a few minutes, I'm going to ask everybody. You then have to go and unmute yourself.
Who has to unmute?
David.
Oh, I need to.
Oh, yes, right. Got it.
Michael, hold on. I can't do any of that.
Right.
That's why I'm telling you now.
Michael.
We'll get you in.
Haley,
I want you to come.
you've brought the average age now by about 50 years.
Where's Gary? There's my brother.
Hi,
Gary.
Where is he?
Hi, how are you doing?
Not yet.
Hello, Gary.
Hello.
No,
Gary Rodney.
My goodness, that's age. He was a wee boy when I left Glasgow.
He was. He was a wee boy.
Hello, Eva.
Hi, Darby.
Who's that?
Wheelam number 3.
Hello, Wheelam.
Hello.
He was.
Oh, there's Auntie Eva.
Oh, Auntie Eva.
Hello, Auntie Eva.
Oh, it's Auntie
Eva.
Whoever Auntie Eva might be, hello.
That's the auntie in Chickwell. How lovely.
That's good that you got on. Where's these boys, Haley?
Michael? I disappeared the mute thing, so.
Michael Shenkin, you see. Did you know him? No. No, you'd left long before me.
Stay there until just wait.
Just touch your finger on.
Oh, there's Myra.
There's
Hi,
Myra.
Myra. That's Myra.
Hi, Geraldine.
Hello. How are you, Myra?
I'm okay. How are you? Nervous.
You okay in Collins?
Hi, Myra.
Well, Collins hurt his back. He's actually flat out
Has
on his back. Yeah. So,
Myra.
he doesn't we don't know what he's done.
Oh,
He's just not very good.
Myra, it's Iris.
I know, I can see you.
All right. Send Colin our love then.
I shall do.
No, wish him better, Myra. Wish him better.
I'll speak to you later.
Where?
I take it they're going to put us all on mute.
That's Myra.
Judith?
Never recognised him in a million.
I don't. She's on mute, maybe.
And then they wonder who these people are. Why am I with them?
Hi. Hi, Barbara. You're in for it again. I've had my gin, Barbara.
Have you? Good, I'm delighted.
Barbara. Hello, Barbara.
Hi, Iris.
Hello there. Good, thanks. And you?
Sorry, I need to phone you.
I don't have.
Barbara, from Glasgow. Lives in Belfast.
Scottish accent.
Stanley.
Hello there, hi.
Yeah, you're on.
There they are. That's Barbara.
Hello, Barbara and Alan.
Hiya.
Hiya. Hi.
Barbara.
Oh, there's the star.
Stanley, love it.
Stanley.
Lady Love.
Hello, Stanley.
Hiya, how are you?
Good, and you?
Good to see you. I'm fine, thank you. Huh?
Hello there, everybody.
That's the only way we can see each other.
Absolutely.
How's Bournemouth?
Yes, hot and sunny sometimes.
Okay, yeah, we're coming down tomorrow.
Yes. In my dreams, the cruise ships are sitting in our back
I
garden.
could imagine.
Yeah, they are. But they're not moving.
We were there for a long time.
Yeah.
How are you able to
Yeah.
talk? I'll get emotional.
Coro.
Your sound is
Hello.
on your printer, on
But where are you?
your keyboard.
Linda
Keyboard.
Oh,
yes, that's Coral.
What do you call it? Other thing.
I can't get onto my iPad for some reason. The phone.
Hello, Carol. Coral.
I can hear you now.
More people this week.
More Scottish.
behind you.
There's more Scottish people on than there is.
Hi, Gary. Everyone is
Hello, Harvey, how are you doing?
Harvey.
Hello. Hi,
Hi,
Stanley.
June. Hi, guys.
Hi, Carol.
Hi.
Geraldine.
Hi, Geraldine. Carol.
I want to see
She's on mute.
We can have that more often like this.
Gary.
Harold.
Hello, Gary.
Hello, Stanley.
Hi, Grant.
Hello, Tim.
What time is it?
Hello, Carl.
Sally.
Oh.
Hi, Mara.
Mara.
Hi, Cora. Hi, Alice.
Oh, hi.
Alice.
Hi,
Alice.
Mara.
Hi, Martin.
Here to talk. Hello.
Hi there.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen,
Okay.
I'm about to mute you all. I have
Oh, it doesn't matter. Bye-bye.
I have such power. When I worked out how to do it. Hold on. You all. Here we go. Now, Geraldine,
Yes.
right, whoever has unmuted themselves, please mute yourself so that we can hear what's going on. Geraldine, I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself. But what name are you under? Michael Schenkin. Oh, I can hear you.
Yes.
But fine.
Am I not okay? I unmuted myself.
Excellent. 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 And then the other thing I have to work out how to do. No, I didn't want to do that. Okay, I'll do that. Put my own name in. Missed. Unfortunately, I can't spell my own name. Okay. Excellent. Right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to welcome you all here to this presentation from Geraldine in Glasgow. Welcome to everybody, wherever you are. I do want to make a special mention of somebody who is, who I saw is on, Judy Simon, who quite remarkably was actually in Terezin as a baby. And it's not impossible, Geraldine, that your mum would have known Judy as a tiny little infant. This program is a part of a three-part series of Belmont in regards to Holocaust Memorial Day. Last week, we had one of our members, Henri Obstveld, talking about his childhood in Nazi-occupied Holland and how he was separated from his parents, but had the miracle of them both surviving, as did he. Geraldine is shortly going to be sharing with us the remarkable story of her mother and her grandmother's survival, especially considering being in Auschwitz with that absolute swine of a man, Dr. Joseph Mengele. And on February the 9th, for those of you who'll be interested in checking in, David Marwell, who was the investigator of the Department of Justice of the United States, charged with finding the swine alive and bringing him to justice. Sadly, he failed to do that because Mengele was well hidden and had people hiding him, so that he failed to bring him to justice. Sad thing. And David has written a book about Mengele in particular. But now we are going to be hearing from Geraldine as soon as I open up. I start sharing the screen. And again, please don't unmute yourself. I can hear somebody talking in the background, and I'm not going to mention the names, but somebody's just unmuted themselves, so they've spotted that. Well done. Share screen. Here we go. Geraldine, good evening.
Good evening, David.
This is your presentation.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity to telling my mum's inspirational story. Mum was a remarkable, brave, intelligent lady who lived through the horrors of the Holocaust, and she was born into a middle-class cultured family and in Prague. And her father was the manager for foreign exchange in the Bohemian Union Bank in Prague.
And we're just looking at a couple of pictures. For those of you who have ever been to Prague, we have a photograph at the top of a statue regarding Franz Kafka, whom Geraldine will be referring to shortly. And at the bottom, this is an old illustration of the remarkable Altneu Schule, which basically the Altneu is the standard by which all our services are run. And on the top left and the bottom right, we have photographs of schules at Königsberg. And what is the family connection with Königsberg, Geraldine?
My father came from Königsberg. He came in, I think it was in early 39 on a yeshiva transport from Königsberg. And he became a reverend, a minister, and a Mao and a Shalchut.
Just let's hear his name. What was your dad's name?
My dad's original name was Horst Grudzinski, but it became Jack Grant, Reverend Jack Grant.
Okay, so Jack started in Königsberg, which was the hometown of the German philosopher Immanuel Kant, and it was also where Lord Jacobowitz actually started out his life. But our focus today is going to be on Geraldine and on Prague. So who have you got here?
This is a family photograph from about 1911. Mum has written on the back. My mum was so clever, she wrote everybody's names on the back of the photograph. And this is 10 years before she was born. Next to the bride and groom on the right, that is my great-grandmother. And on the left of the bride is my great-grandfather. And if you go to the back row, the gentleman fourth along with the bow tie from the left, that is my grandfather, my mother's father. That is Rudolf Hermann. And he is standing next to, well, at the very end, the last one on the left is actually Franz Kafka. And Kafka's sister is standing next to my grandfather, because he's married to my grandfather's brother, Karl, Uncle Karl, next to Kafka. So that's Gabriela Kafka, who he's married to next to him. That was my mother referred to her as Auntie Ella, and that's their little son Felix in the front row. Kafka died in 1934, but that little boy, gorgeous little boy, he died in the Holocaust. And in fact, we went, as I'm going to jump ahead a bit, but we went nearly 50 years after my mother had left Prague. We took her back as a family. My dear sister, who sadly passed away a few months ago, and my brother-in-law and my twin brother and myself, we took Mum back to Prague, and we went to see, she wanted to go to her grandfather's grave, her father's grave, my grandfather. And we went to the cemetery on the outskirts of Prague. It's a vast cemetery, and we searched. It took a long, long time before we could find my grandfather's grave. I mean, my mother was in tears. nearly 50 years since she'd been there, and we had to pull the ivy. She remembered that they had a very unusual stone for his grave. He died in 1938 before the war, a young man, and it was shaped like a tree, and actually it was the ivy that was growing wild that preserved the stone, and we pulled it back and it was in good condition. So that was there. And actually we didn't realize, but all the Franz Kafka and his parents, his family are all buried very close by to my grandfather.
Thank you. For those who have been to Prague and those who haven't, they may know it was intended that it would be basically a museum of the destroyed Jewish people. And I think it was remarkable of your mum to go back. I know going there, I found it very difficult to see many, many tourists going through, particularly, although they were young and not culpable, German tourists going through, looking at us, and it was exactly what Hitler and his henchmen had planned, a museum of dead people. And it was very hard to see that, but at least one had grateful to know that one was actually alive and that we had outlasted these swines. We've got here, I know your mum did this later, but just talk about this sketch, would you please?
Well, that's just I think that was done about 1941, just when they had started wearing the star, the Jude, the Jew. But I just wanted to fill you in. So my mum was born in 1921, and she lived in the centre of town till she was about 7 or 8, and then because her father worked for the bank, they built a special block of flats in a very nice area. It was purely for bank employees, a larger flat, and that's where they lived till 1939. And it was in 1938 her father died, so it was just, my mum was an only child, so it was just my grandma and my mum. The Germans occupied, a few months after my grandfather died, my mum and grandma were moved to the other side of the river after the Germans occupied Czechoslovakia, and they went across the river to this area. And it was during that time that I think that she's made this drawing, 1941, of all the laws came in that they had to be wearing their star, that they weren't allowed to go to school, they weren't allowed to go to cinema, everything was forbidden. Life became very difficult.
Let's just go back a bit. Your mum was, as I understand it, a talented artist. Tell us something about the development of her art and the opportunities that she had in those.
Well, my mum, after she attended after secondary school, she attended a year of private English grammar school, and then her grandma bought a Kapitalistin certificate, which paid for 2 years in she went for 2 years to the Roterschule of Graphic and Fashion Design. And after that, my grandma, her mother bought a certificate for her to attend Jerusalem's famous Bezalel Art School, but my mom so didn't want to be parted from my grandma that she cried and cried, and they gave the place eventually to somebody else. So.
And one of the things that I just sort of quickly heard in passing, which was very important to your mum's survival, is that she went to a private English grammar school or grammar school where she learnt English. Could you clarify that for me?
It was I think it was English grammar school. My mother was fluent in several languages, and I think it was an English grammar school.
Yeah, so the point I wanted to draw out was that it was your mum's very good fortune, not only to be an extremely talented artist, but also to have several languages, and that was going to be fundamental to her survival in what was to happen. I think one of the things that, when we think about the Holocaust, or at least when I do, I think about the war was 1939 to 45, so the Holocaust was 39 to 45. And of course, there was a lot of cruelty in even up to 1939, with particularly after Kristallnacht. But the Germans didn't really get going onto the Nazis, sorry, did not get going onto mass murder and the introduction of various laws in different occupied countries until after 1941. So this is an image that your mum drew. Go on, Geraldine.
Yeah, so under Hitler, the Council of the Jewish Community, they had to provide volunteers for agriculture because the farmers were sent away to the army. So my mum belonged to a Zionist group called El Al, not the airline, and she went that summer to various large farms in Bohemia and Moravia, which actually helped her for what was coming next. Because on the 28th of April 1942, my mum and my grandma were transported to Theresienstadt. They went in great haste, but they'd been preparing. They knew it was coming for quite a long time. And my mum was very smart, and she told me that I don't know if everybody knows what bechamel is, it's margarine and flour. You know, you make like a paste for like a cheese sauce, and she put notes, money inside, and she sewed it inside the lining of her coat. So to help, you know, for whatever was coming ahead. And they actually went there in a normal train to Terezin. Theresienstadt, you know, was like up the army barracks where they'd emptied it out and they'd made it for the Jewish people, where in fact there was a lot of elderly Jewish people. I think you've got a painting, David, a drawing of one of the Austrian.
We'll have a look at that in just a minute. Okay. I just wanted to highlight here, Theresienstadt isn't actually that far from Prague. My memory is it was about a 45-minute to an hour bus ride. And what we're looking at here is, of course, people on the top left walking towards a train station. And at the bottom, you can see a train arriving. And the train tracks actually came into the barracks, but that was later on. We are going to see a number of paintings and drawings by young children. Well, I have no idea whether, nor does Geraldine, whether her mum supervised these particular children in the children's home, but we have no idea whether these young children survived or not. 14,000 out of the 15,000 children in Terezin were murdered. But I did want to, particularly at Holocaust Memorial Day, bring these paintings, and sorry, I'm emotional now.
My mum.
Remember these names, and that whether they survived or not, their names live on and their memories live on of these young people who Geraldine's mum would have been involved with in art. So this is people arriving at Terezin. And what can we see here, Geraldine?
Well,
all right, I'll do it.
On the
left side is a bare barracks, which is where people were sleeping. On the bottom right, people actually arriving into the barracks, and then the top, the same foul lie as over the gates of Auschwitz. Arbeit macht frei, makes free. Part of that whole Nazi pretense for the arrivals of what was going on. And in the case of Terezin, it was set up as a false pretend camp in some ways to try and present to the world that they were not murdering the Jews. And indeed, the Danish Red Cross, amongst others, allowed itself to be deceived as to what was going on there.
It was the propaganda camp, as you say, David. And I'd just like to say that you were only allowed a certain amount of luggage, obviously, a case to take. And my mum, obviously, she put in her watercolor paints instead of taking other things. She took that along with her. And that's a painting done by Mum. That's just on the outskirts of the walls of the Theresienstadt ghetto that she painted.
It was a big place. It was a big place, and one of the enormous frustrations is listening to the nonsense people say that they didn't know what was going on. This was in the centre of Terezin.
My mum worked in the youth garden. She was second in charge of the youth gardens, which this painting, these walls are fairly close to the youth gardens where they grew things, and there were the children that were in Theresienstadt from about the age of 12 to 18. Some of them were allowed to help in the youth gardens, and one of these was a lady who became good friends of my mum, a lady called Eva Urban, and she married later on, she married my mum's friend, in inverted commas, Peter Urban, who my mother had left, which I'll go back to after, had left all her paintings from Theresienstadt. That's how we have them. She left them with him, and I'm in touch with her still today, and she's told me amazing stories about my mum saving her from beatings when she threw her shoe up. She was about 13 years old, 12, 13. She threw her shoe up to one of the apple trees, desperate to get an apple. The apple fell down, but the shoe didn't come down. So there was a big hoo-ha, and Mum had to speak to whoever and make sure that she wasn't beaten. My mum was very brave, and she helped her. Eva was laughing to me still today about how the way mum behaved to get her off.
Yeah, we're going to jump about a little bit historically, because you just referred to Peter and Eva and the saving of the paintings. And what we're going to hear later is that your mum was deported from Terezin later on, but was able to give the art to Peter before she went on one of the infamous trains to Auschwitz. And that was what permitted some of this artwork that your mum did at the time to survive. What have we got here?
This is an Austrian man who was tricked. Many of them were tricked into going to Theresienstadt. They thought they actually paid money to go there. They thought they were going to a health spa, and that's just, you can see the look in his face. Mum's really caught the
sadness and
sadness. Just, yeah. And
okay. Now, up at the top left, it says Mousy's room in Terezin.
Well, Mousy was my mother's nickname. She was so tiny as a child, and Mousy is little mouse in German. So that was her nickname, Mousy. So in this room, there was about 40 of them slept in this room, and they had no furniture or anything, but they used their suitcases they covered them and to be like furniture. They made it the best that they could. And but things were very, very difficult, very difficult.
The colour of your mum's painting kind of belies the grim greyness of the life that they were all leading.
Mum went when she was in Terezin. That's a caricature that Mum did of the bartering that was going on in Terezin. There was they were all stealing and then passing or selling on, chopping and changing, and that's just what that represents. And in the middle, the black man, that's the secret Jewish police that they had. There was a lot of secret Jewish police that they were in charge, and they were under a lot of pressure every day. They had to send 1,000 from Theresienstadt onto, what they didn't know was to the east, was to Auschwitz. But before we get on to that, I'd like you to, if you've got I'd like to talk about the Brunderbar play. You've got the picture. Mum in her spare time. Mum in her spare time went to do as much nature study and artwork with the children in Theresienstadt, and to give them a bit of something to do to keep them busy. And David's got up in the screen now a picture of the children performing from Theresienstadt of the Brunderbar play, the musical, and for the 70th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz, the lady in the middle, the little girl in the middle who plays the part of the pussycat, is a lady called Ella Weisberger, and she was invited for the 70th anniversary to come to Scottish Parliament in Edinburgh, which I was invited to. And she was one of the speakers, and somebody took me to meet her because she came from Prague and had been in Theresienstadt, and I asked her if by any, maybe she'd come across my mom being there at the same time in the camp. And I went through all her names, nothing rang a bell, she didn't know. Anyway, unbeknown to me, the next day, there was an event was taking place again for Holocaust Memorial Day in a museum called St Mungo's Museum in Glasgow, which a dear old friend, Adeline Links, phoned me the night before to say that they were going to be speaking about my mum and I must come. So we went, and I don't know what made me do it, but the last minute I took my mum's book, because she'd made a book in 2002 she had an exhibition of her artworks, which we'll talk about later. But I took the book with me, and I don't know why. And we went early and was sitting in the cafe having a coffee, and the door opened, and this lady, Ella Weisberger, walked in, and she saw me. She came over and she gave me a hug, and she sat next to me. And I said to her, "Look, Ella, I've got my mum's book of her art. Maybe she did something with you at the time. Maybe something will ring a bell." Anyway, she froze. She dug into my arm as we got to the page of the storybook, the Hansel and Gretel storybook. And there it is, the Hansel and Gretel story. And in her other hand, unbeknown to me that morning, she'd asked the museum for a photocopy because it rang a bell. She knew she had seen it somewhere before, definitely seen it. So I just couldn't believe that my mum had obviously been telling the story, doing this art with her of the Hansel and Gretel, from the Hansel and Gretel storybook that mum created.
Let's go back a bit for a minute. And let's see if I can do this with my technology. The children on this opera, and I think if this works, we've got a little shot of it. The children look so healthy there. Geraldine, how many of the children?
David, it was for the, obviously just, it was the benefit of the Red Cross, but the lady that was the pussycat, she told me the only time that she felt she was like a child was when she performed in that play on stage. And to the very right of the picture is another little girl who I've mentioned, is Eva Urban in a tartan skirt. And I find it unbelievable that in that photograph, I happen to have met and know two of the children that performed, because I believe that only four survived. And I just find that absolutely unbelievable.
Pretty sobering, isn't it? I just want to, let's see if I can do this. Sorry, hold on. I just want to go back a bit now as we move forward. Yes, so we were looking at the barter. What have we got a photograph of here?
That's for in Theresienstadt, the children playing with the ashes on the ground. They think they were like warm ashes from fires. And that was used for the cover, that painting was used for the cover of the book that was published in 2002 from her exhibition that was in Kelvin Grove Art Gallery and Museum. And I'm actually working that. They only made so many copies, and for the last 3-4 years, together with Deborah Haas, who was the curator for the exhibition, we've been working on with all the team at Kelvin Grove Museum on a new book being published, and it's hopefully going to be ready for this autumn, which would be wonderful for Mum's 100th birthday, which would be amazing, because it's been going on a while. So anyway, so my grandma was put 3 times on the train to go to the east from Theresienstadt, because my grandma, remember, was with my mum the whole time. And 3 times my mother was able to get her off the train. It wasn't really a train, it was a cattle wagon, as we all know. And on the 4th time, my mother was unable to get her off. So she left all her belongings from Auschwitz, from Theresienstadt. She left them all, she gathered everything in quickly together, and she left them with her friend Peter Urban. And she jumped onto the wagon, but she wasn't in the same compartment as my grandma. And they traveled all through the night for hours and hours. And well, I don't need to describe what that journey was like, with people dying all around, and the filth and the no air and nothing. And they arrived in the hellhole of Auschwitz. And it took her all through the night before she actually was reunited with my grandma. And they were fortunate. Mengele was to the left, to the right, the Doberman dogs shouting, barking away, and they're shouting, the SS buggers shouting, "Raus, raus, out, out." And my mum and my grandma, they were in Auschwitz-Birkenau, and which there my mum was went in her spare time. They kept the children. There was a children's block in Auschwitz, and it was most. So she went there when she could to do a bit of drawing and see, whenever it was possible, and just to give them a bit of something. She went quietly, and there was an SS Slovak collaborator who spotted Mum's talent of her art, and he took her to the gypsy camp, and he got her to draw a beautiful gypsy for his wife, and in exchange he gave her like a bit of extra food. So once again, art helped save her and my grandma's life. And then the word got around that my mum's talents, and she was soon summoned to go and paint for the, as you mentioned earlier, the bastard Joseph Mengele, who did the horrific experimentations on.
Geraldine, can I just hold for a minute? Just because I didn't want to go past these pictures, which were actually done in Terezin by the children, possibly at the encouragement of your mum. And as I said, in case these children didn't survive,
sorry,
let us just hear their names again. Helen Mandlova, who was able to have a vision of a dream in such a terrible place. Ruth Gapmanova, who had an underwater fantasy, and Anna Bekona, with her memories of her home. And at the top, this little lad who's drawn a picture of his home. You can't see the name there, but I think it's Richard Hertz. And it came as a surprise to me, it shouldn't have, but what came as a surprise to me was knowing that there was a children's block at Auschwitz. But as I've begun to read the biography of Mengele, which is one of the most disturbing books about the Holocaust I've read, and I've read an awful lot, the people of Terezin were kept alive deliberately, as were gypsies and others, so that Mengele could do his genetic research. To do his research, he needed complete families, and in particular twins. So the goal was not to destroy and kill all these people straight away, including the children, because he he was actually doing genetic research on obscure illnesses as a way of seeing if he could find cures for German soldiers and establish who was inherently frail and therefore suitable for euthanasia. And here we're not talking about just Jews, we're talking about Germans, because as we know, the Nazis also murdered many people who were crippled so that they could create a perfect race. So uniquely, Terezin, people from Terezin were kept together as families and were kept together. And that turned out to be yet again another, I hate to use this word in the context of Auschwitz, but it was part, I wouldn't say good fortune, but it was part of your mother's story of survival. And we're just seeing this Hansel and Gretel book. And I know we jump back a little bit in time, but really for your mum to have, in a place like Terezin, which is a blooming bleak place, to have color and warmth and the capacity to try and cheer children up in such horrible environment, quite remarkable.
Yeah.
And again, we're going to jump forward a little bit because this covers the Auschwitz period, but was done much later. So if you could explain to us what's going on here.
Well, I'd just like to say that mum was ill, got very ill in Auschwitz. She had pleurisy, she had terrible boils on her. And Art, because the Slovak collaborator, she'd done drawings for him, he went looking for her one day, and she was lying ill in her straw mattress, and there was no medicine there, but he gave her extra food rationing, which really helped her to nourish her back to better health. Anyway, word got about, as I said earlier, of mum's artistic talents and to Mengele. And
sorry to interrupt, but you're not sharing the screen anymore, so we can't see the artwork.
Geraldine, just wait a minute. Thank you. Hold on. Let me get to screen share screen. Thank you very much. Hold on. We'll get there. Hold on, Geraldine. Hold on. Can you see it now?
So that what you're showing just now is what my mum did in 1997 by memory. That is a copy of what she did. She got permission and decorated the children's block in Auschwitz to give them a bit of colour in the last days of their lives. It was like Eskimo children, Indian, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and her beloved Mickey and Minnie Mouse. And I must tell you that after my mum died in 2007, it took us several months, I think a year, for my sister Susan, my brother Gary and myself to clear the house. And we went to the loft where, as you're all aware that Holocaust survivors hoard everything. And I found this roll of Anaglypta wallpaper that was rolled up, and I opened it up, and it was a bit of the Snow White and Minnie and Mickey Mouse that she was practicing for this frieze, which is in Yad Vashem. It's a continuous exhibition in Yad Vashem called No Child's Play. And the bit of Anaglypta that I found for her practicing, I had it framed, and it hangs in my granddaughter's bedroom today in London. Wow. So that's very nice. Anyway, there was absolutely no colour in Auschwitz, none at all. And I as I mentioned, that mum was summoned to go and paint for Dr. Mengele, and it was one of the boys. They were called Laufers to run. That means to run in German, in the striped pajamas. I think my mum found out after they were abused boys. And when Mengele wanted you, you had to run. Anyway, he never ever spoke a word to her. He was in his hut. He had a hut. The mud was yellow, she said. And on top of the yellow mud was a beautiful Persian rug. And all she could see, he marched up and down as his highly shiny, over-polished boots. And he just pointed at her to draw. And she had to do, as you mentioned already, David, it was like the markings and twins, his experiments and twins. and she to do, and actually it was only recently that I started to think about it, because it's quite ironic that my mum had twins, my brother Gary and myself. Anyway, she also was had to do and ink the dwarf family, the family tree, and she knew then that if she made a mess with the ink on the paper, her life was ended. She was like trembling, and that's why her book was called I Knew It Was Painting for My Life. And that's she survived, and
just so that people can get some background, another bit of background. It's not that Mengele was a lover of art, but he actually thought that the paintings and drawings were better quality for his what he called research using drawings, and the drawings that were being done and this so-called research was actually being sent to universities in Berlin to and this man had a PhD as well as being a clinical doctor. And just so that, again, background people, he was in the SS, Mengele. He served on the Eastern Front. His wife used to visit him there. There was nobody in her family who could have doubted what he was up to. His wife also visited him at Auschwitz, and the pretense after the war was that nothing bad had gone on and nothing terrible had happened. And your mum and everybody else around him lived in fear of their lives for every second that they were near this man. And of course, most of the time that they weren't near him as well.
The children's block, David, the children's, well, this is Auschwitz. Mum did that later of Auschwitz with the train tracks and all the luggage, the piles of luggage in that painting. Going back to the child talking about the children's blog.
Yeah.
My mum got to know the night before, that they were going to, the children were all being taken away from the tree. All the children and the adults from the previous block to my mum's were all going to be gassed. And there was a little girl called Hannah Canova, who she adored, who she knew was in the children's block. She knew her she lived in her area in Prague. And she said she had big dark brown eyes, and she went, I don't know, she had such courage and strength and stubbornness, my mum. And she went to the children's block, and this little girl had something wrong with her leg. And she demanded, Mum, that she said she was taking her to the sanitarium. It's not really a proper hospital there, but she needed to take her. And she was the only child that survived at that time. That was in 1944, I think it was in March 1944, that terrible day when the whole camp went. It was, the chimneys burnt all night long. The smell, we can't imagine it. And
yeah, Mengele
they'd emptied it.
Mengele was also in charge of medical care on the camp, and that included, of course, for the German soldiers and their collaborators. And one of the biggest threats to their life, pretty ironic in the current environment in a way, is a pandemic, and in particular typhus. And Mengele worked out how to get rid of typhus in the camp, which nobody else had been able to do before, by doing what you've just described. They sent everybody in a single barracks to their death, cleansed the barrack completely, then moved the next group in, so that they always had an empty barracks to clean, because of course they needed people alive, A, for work, and B, for his vile medical experiments.
Anyway, David, I mentioned earlier that about my mum's new book.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, one of the curators who came to my house that's working on the book with me, he's actually from the Czech Republic, And he came here, and I played a tape that Mum had recorded for her children and grandchildren for a story, and she talks about this little girl, Hannah Canova, that she'd taken her, and the rest of the children were gassed. And he sat amazed that he had heard a testimony that he'd read from this lady, that he knew all about, and she'd mentioned about a Mousy, my mother's nickname, a Mousy Herman, having taken her and saved her life, and that I just couldn't believe that she was still alive. She never ever talked. She couldn't talk about it until about, I think, 7 or 8 years ago. I don't think she's alive anymore. But it was just quite something to me that she did survive to a good age.
Yeah, well, thanks to your mum. And we're now going to see some fairly searing images.
That's later on. That's later on, actually, in Bergen-Belsen, David.
Yes.
So my mum, from Auschwitz, my mum was put yet again in the showers. She was in the gas chamber, my mum, 3 times. I mean, and on the 3rd time, she was promised that because occasionally they did put on the actual showers and not the Zyklon B powder, and they survived, and they were sent. They left Auschwitz and they were sent to do slave labor in Hamburg Harbor and under the SS Neugamma in concentration camp. And she was actually moving about a bit between near Hanover and Tiefstadt, and she did different work. They were digging the trenches while they were bombing overhead. And once she said, I think that she told the story that she was asked to paint the dining hall, so she got indoor work instead of being outside where they were bombing. So that saved her yet again. Her art, her artistic talent seemed to have saved her in many times. And from there, that was from Auschwitz. She was in Auschwitz 6.5 months, from the 18th of December to July 1944, and then she went from slave labor to April, I think it was the 5th of April 1945, and they arrived. They were sent to that godforsaken hellhole, she said, of Bergen-Belsen. It was 10 days before the British Army came to liberate Bergen-Belsen, where the dead and the dying were just lying all around. And that is a painting of the bodies just piled up, and Mum's been able to put in a bit of colour in that painting. She said she went a bit crazy and she just started painting like mad. I honestly, I don't know. And she befriended in.
Such a haunting image. It's such a haunting image of the people there.
It is.
I think these pictures speak for themselves.
When she was in that's Bergen, the ground trembling for days. The ground was trembling as the British Army tanks approached Bergen-Belsen, when it was liberated on the 15th of April 1945. And they were there. It was for about 3 months. My grandma was in poor health. I think she had typhoid, and she was suffering from malnutrition. She was a doctor from Ireland called Dr. Sean Stiles, who he helped them. And my mum was, I think she said she was giving out the cigarettes to the British Army, and through this Dr. Stiles, he invited her. They were having a party in weeks later, an officer's party, and he invited my mum to come, and she said, oh, she'd nothing to wear out of her rags, I don't know, her sewing skills, she made something, a dress, and she was introduced, this Dr. Sean Stiles introduced her to Montgomery, to Field Marshal Montgomery, and she even had a dance with Monty.
What a remark.
And she said that used to say, sorry,
what a remarkable change of
she
life.
was tight, shaker. Oh.
Maybe that was why she was about to go on to Scotland.
No, well, from Belsen.
I know she didn't. It's just, it was a clue as to what was going to happen. Well, what a transformation from being on a pile of bones to dancing with one of our great war heroes of the Second World War.
Well, Mum was so fluent in different languages, she became the interpreter for the British Army. She was translating, helping them. So she was advised to go, that the Swedish Red Cross advised them to go to Sweden, my mum and my grandma, so they were put in the boat to Malmö in Sweden, and that's a beautiful painting of a gorgeous, I think she was a Dutch girl, that was, I think she was dying of TB on the boat that Mum painted. And they started a new life. They arrived in Malmö in Sweden, and they were taken near to Gothenburg, but they were cleansed, dusted down, all quarantined because of all the disease and infectious diseases that people had on the boat coming from the camps. And that's a lovely picture of my mum and my grandma in Gothenburg, near to Gothenburg. That's a painting of where they were at the beginning, where they lived. It was the Jewish council came and helped, and there was a gentleman called Mr. Sterner, who had a big shoe factory, and he came along to visit them, to visit the refugees with his daughter Mary, who was a few years younger than my mum, but she became my mum's lifelong friend. And they used to have my mum and grandma for Friday night dinner, and they helped them. And within, I think by November 1945, my mum already had an art exhibition with selling paintings. I mean, she was amazing how she got herself from out of what had been just months earlier. And my grandma was brought back to good health. She would nurse back to good health in hospital. And she was a milliner, and she worked as a milliner. And my mom started, her exhibition was a big success, and she made some money, and eventually she started making handmade, beautiful painted table mats and paintings and stuffed animals. She was so talented. And they went eventually, word got around in the Gothenburg local newspaper, and she got a good write-up, and eventually she actually started employing people herself. I mean, quite phenomenal. And was working had a team working. She was her mats went into a big department store selling for Christmas. She did her beloved Minnie and Mickey Mouse and a Christmas theme, because that was very popular in Gothenburg. And so,
can I just ask, because I realize I've never asked you, what was your grandma's name?
Her name was Anna Herman.
Okay.
Anna Herman.
Okay. Now,
Anna
your mum's in Sweden. So how does she get to Glasgow? What happened?
Well, so my mum had a friend. She made a friend in Sweden who, sadly, her husband had died, and young, and she had a little baby, a toddler, I think about 2 years of age. And this friend's mother-in-law lived in Glasgow, and she was taking her son to meet her mother, she had never seen the baby. So she went to Glasgow to see her mother-in-law, and there was this tall, handsome young man was lodging with her mother-in-law. And she said, I showed her pictures of her friend Marianne. And lo and behold, they started, in those days, you started writing to each other. And within a short while, my dad went to visit my grandma and my mom in Gothenburg. And I think they went away together with my mother, obviously chaperoning wherever they had a, oh no. And within a short while they got engaged and they got married the following that November. I think that's the year in November. That was in 1951.
Well, this is
That's
true.
my mum and dad's wedding picture. They got married in London because my mum had 2 first cousins and her auntie Terezin, my grandma Anna's sister, that were already in London, that had survived. They'd come earlier from Vienna, and so that's a picture of my mum and my dad. My dad was from Königsberg, and he was Horst Grudzinski, as I said, but became Jack Grant.
And he had I don't think any or many of his family survived the war.
No, my parents never. We weren't really aware. It was only my father died young, sadly, in 1986, and it was only after my father's death that my mum started really to talk about her past with what had happened in the Holocaust. Because my dad left behind, he came, as I said earlier, in the yeshiva transport, and he left behind his parents and his little brother, and he never ever saw them again. They were gassed, they think, in 1943. And my mother did a very clever thing on my father's gravestone. She wrote also in memory of my dad's parents, got the names, and his little brother. And anyway, my mother, I find it amazing that through all what mum went through, how she had faith. She was so strong in her faith, being with my dad, being religious. After everything, I don't know where she found her faith. And so she was remarkable. She met the Queen twice because of her, firstly with Deborah Paz, the curator, a family friend. She gave her the confidence to go ahead with the art exhibition. That's an ongoing exhibition in Kelvin Grove Art Gallery and Museum in Glasgow.
Geraldine.
Yeah, she made a teaching pack.
I think I'd rather put it. I think I'd rather put it the other way. The Queen had the honour of meeting your mother twice, not that way round. Okay.
Queen had the honour, yes. The Queen had the honour of meeting my mother twice. She actually said, on the second time, do you remember? And that's well, the one on the left is us as young with my dear sister Susan, and my twin brother Gary, with my mum and dad. And then the picture to the right, that was at the exhibition in 2002 at Kelvin Grove. That's my sister Susan to the right of my mum, with her eldest daughter Simone Wilson, and then Tally Kramer, and that's me on the left of mum with my younger daughter Katie Goodman, and then to the left of her is Hayley Groden. And they always called her Mousy. It wasn't Grandma, it was Mousy. And I just like to say that in 2002, mum's filmed and did a teaching pack for Scottish education that was used. It was based on her life, and it was based for secondary schools in Scotland, this teaching pack, and it's just actually been revised. It's going to be ready soon for schools, done by Paula Cowan, who from Glasgow, who is through Vision Schools for Scotland. And as a result of all her contribution to education, mum was honoured and became a free man, which I think you've got a lovely picture of her, David, when she became a free man of East Renfrewshire. Oh, that's mum, and when we took her back in Prague in '93, that's the picture on the left of her with Susan and I, and mum smiling very proudly at her being made a free man. And she was, she was really remarkable. Her attitude was that it didn't matter whether you were brown skinned, white skinned, pink skinned, yellow skinned, we're all human flesh. We should all love each other. And I've forgotten to say that I think it was about 1988, 89, mum was through the late Elizabeth Maxwell, the late Robert Maxwell's wife. She put an exhibition together with a gentleman, a Holocaust survivor named Roman Halter, and she got some of mum's art in her book that she published. and it came to Glasgow the following year, I think in '89. And I actually had the pleasure of, oh, it's gone off of Elizabeth.
Yeah, it's gone on to you now.
So can you hear? Is it
on
just
to
me?
you. Yeah.
Sorry.
We're looking at you now.
Oh, you're looking at me now? Had the pleasure of Elizabeth Matzel coming to my house. I had to have all these people came for lunch after the opening event, which was wonderful for Mum to. She was just an amazing, and like it's over 13 years ago since she's passed away, and she's left. It's just that her testimony lives on, and that the fact that this teaching pack is now going to be digitized and be used in schools, that for future generations is so important. So just to keep that, we should never ever forget. That was what Mum wanted, and that Kelvin Grove have her wonderful art to tell the story.
Now, Geraldine, one of your daughters has told a tale on you. I see in the chat. One of your daughters has told a tale on you in the chat box.
Oh, has she? What she said?
Well, this is Katie, who just everybody should know was for Channel 5 in Washington for the inauguration of Joe Biden, which was I know how anxious you were beforehand, because who knew what was going to happen in Washington. But Katie tells us that you are a wonderful artist too.
I'm not a wonderful artist, but I have actually, I am a little bit artistic, and I actually have sold a few paintings a few years ago. I actually haven't painted for 4 years. I keep promising myself that I will go back to it, but yes. And actually, Katie herself, let me tell you, she has had a painting hanging in Kelvin Grove Art Gallery when she was, I think, about 14 or 15 from school. She was second and won a silver medal from her school. And it was in the Kelvin Grove in the museum for 2 months there for people to view. So I'm paying her back now.
I'm surprised they didn't rename the art gallery, the Grant Art Gallery in the circle.
And actually, what we're talking about in the family art, Simone Wilson's daughter, my sister's my mum's granddaughter, my sister's granddaughter, her daughter Mia, she's very artistic. She's doing art and very artistic. So it's probably come down the line a little bit. Mum would be very proud of that.
That is really wonderful, and there's some lovely comments in the chat box. Geraldine, it's been a pleasure getting to know you during the last 2-3 weeks whilst we've prepared this talk. You've done wonderfully.
You'll have a more peaceful life now, David.
That is true. You've done wonderfully well, despite all your anxieties that you wouldn't. It's been a remarkable story we've heard from you.
So thank you for letting me share Mum's wonderful, her inspirational.
It's been really fantastic. So I'd like to take this opportunity of thanking you, wishing everybody a good evening, and just to remind you, depressing as it is, that you could hear about Mengele and the attempt to pursue justice for the swine. That's on the 9th of February at 8 o'clock. But in the meantime, I want to wish everybody healthy, safe time ahead. You should all be vaccinated next week, if not beforehand. Okay? Good night, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much.